Good afternoon or good morning to those in the Central Plains and the West Coast. This is Nevin Gussack, the host of the Patriotic Populist, and here is my co-host, uh, Herschel Miller from Oklahoma. I'm from South Florida, and today we have our second guest, Lloyd, who is friends with Herschel, who's politically engaged. But before we go into a little bit about Lloyd's biography, how you doing today, Herschel?
Oh, I'm doing good, Nevin. It's been a real good day here. I'm glad to be back home from Mississippi. Looking forward to this interview, and I can't wait to get it done.
Great, great. How you doing today, Lloyd?
I'm doing really good, man. It's a nice day in Montana. We don't get a lot of nice days anymore, so I have no complaints. I'm cruising along.
Nice, nice. And everything is great in South sunny Florida. Took a nice walk, did my exercise, meal prep, had a delicious lunch. All is good in the world, all things considered. So before we get into our political discussion, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Lloyd, just like a kind of a brief biography?
I'm 30 years old, right? I've kind of gone through phases. I think we all go through political phases, but I was born in a deep red. I wasn't born here, but I've lived my whole life in a deep red state. You know, conservatism and Republican views have been shoved in my face since birth, right? But I've always, until I was like 22, I was like a super liberal. I was super hard liberal. I mean, I still gush over Obama. That's still my guy, right? I'm still my hero as a young black male. But like I was a super hard liberal, and then I got to about 23, 24, 25, and the older I got, I started to get more and more libertarian, or I guess you could call conservative, whatever you actual conservative. But and then it got to a point where it's like, look, I will never. I realized I'll never be truly like a Republican, whatever you consider American Republican. And I just don't agree with it. I can't. There's nothing about it that appeals to me. And so I still view myself as a libertarian, as a true libertarian, but I do lean left on like most American issues. When America has an issue, I lean left. In the world politics, I feel like I lean right. I'm pretty conservative on the global scale, but as far as American politics goes, I'm pretty right leaning, or sorry, left leaning American politics. And yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm a father of two kids, got a wife. I
Nice.
just bought a house. When you buy a house, you become more conservative. Like it's your property. Like you become more libertarian. You don't want to pay taxes on your house. Like nobody wants to. And so I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just experiencing the world for the first time, and that's kind of shaped my worldview. But it's working out. Whatever I'm doing, it seems to be working out. Life is good. So
And you have a podcast of your own, from what I understand. Am I correct in saying that?
yep, that's correct. Yeah, and actually, my first ever guest was Herschel. Ever, first ever guest. Yeah, I do. It's called Lip Service. I haven't done it in some time. Now that Trump lost, like politics really hasn't been interesting for a little bit. Like Biden is not very. He's not the same character that Trump was, and I sort of got my way. I mean, I didn't really want Biden to win. I would rather someone else win, but it's better than Trump in my opinion. And I just like there's nothing to talk about really. It's kind of like even if Biden is bad, it's just like continuation of what Trump did. There's nothing really exciting to talk about yet. So, but that'll probably continue here soon. This kind of stuff gives me the juice to, keep doing that stuff. So appreciate it. Really do.
Yeah, yeah, of course. We love it. We're looking forward to having you on the show. Herschel, did you have some questions? Because Lloyd mentioned a lot of very interesting points that I could really get 1,000 questions from, 1,000 good questions. Did you want to shoot him a question
Well,
based on
yeah,
his
I've got to go.
biography?
Yeah, I've got to go ahead and say, it's funny to me because all three of us have journeys that start in the Obama presidency. You know, are either disillusionment with conservatism or disillusionment with the Republican Party, disillusionment with the Democratic Party, and it's interesting to me because I can say the moment that I changed was in the Trump presidency, but the moment I got involved in politics was the Obama presidency. So what I want to ask you, Lloyd, is like, what was the moment, if you can recall it, that made you kind of sit around and think, well, I don't really want to be a liberal anymore. It doesn't appeal to me.
I think that moment was probably, uh, I would say slightly after Obamacare, right? Because again, everyone in my circle thinks Obamacare is just like Satanism, right? Like it's the worst thing ever to exist, and I don't agree with that per se. I think it's better than what we had, but I think it's like it's the wrong answer to the question, right? Like the question is like, can we make healthcare affordable? I think we can. I just think that Obamacare is kind of the wrong way to look at it. This half, either you go full in, the government does it, or you don't have that. Like you figure out a solution that's kind of I wouldn't call it extreme, but like you can't just go halfway in. Half the government does it, half the people increase taxes. It doesn't work, right? That's what we're doing now, and it's just kind of a continuation of that. So after Obamacare happened, that's kind of what I was like, look, this is not like working. This a lot of people I know were pretty adversely affected by Obamacare. Now that's a privileged place to be because I know Obamacare had pretty good impacts on like lower income people, but it didn't do a really good job past that, right? Like I know people that literally lost their health care because of that, and like even if it's just one person, that's still you got to think about that. And I just didn't agree with it. I think we can either go full socialized medicine or we could do a very libertarian, free market, no subsidy approach, right? Like I think both of those would be good options. I don't mind trying either one, but the Obamacare is kind of in the middle. It doesn't meet anyone's needs in my opinion. Like it just increases tax on everybody. I just don't know what I don't know what it does. Maybe I'm privileged to make enough money to where it doesn't affect me as much, but I don't know. But that was really the moment. It was Obamacare, and just knowing that like I just it turns out I don't agree with everything that Obama said. Like I did. I thought he was gonna be my guy, but it wasn't everything. It was a lot of stuff, but not everything. Right. That was the moment.
And that kind of makes sense to me because a lot of the things that I've witnessed in my personal life, like when I went to college, and we'll probably talk about education later, but it was one of them things that I've always kind of hated because what the government's doing right now with education in most of the public universities is they're they're writing blank checks and just letting the universities do whatever they want. And it seems that that's definitely not the only problem. But when Nixon done that, and I think it was 1971, if memory serves, when he done that, is his goal was to get more people in college and to save money in the long term. But what that turned into was getting less people into college that actually could pay for it once they got out, and increasing the cost to unimaginable amounts. I can't remember what the last statistic I seen for the cost of all the education in the United States in 1 year, but it's some outrageously high number that you wouldn't believe the first time you see it.
That's the number one debt they say, right? College tuition is the number one, the highest debt the Americans hold overall, I believe. So yeah, I mean, obviously, whatever we have now is just not working, and that's something I support. I support, um, like taxpayer funded tuition. Like I would rather live in a society of educated people, and that way we don't have this movement of anti-intellectualism, right? Like we have now, just fake news and disinformation. Like go online right now, half the things you see are just going to be false, and there's just no one's stopping it. Facebook's not stopping it. Twitter's not stopping it. Amazon, no one's doing anything about it really. Like they're trying. They banned Trump at the last week of his presidency. Like, okay, cool, but like, even the higher ups get free passes to just say whatever they want, do what they want, and then it spills down to everyone else. So I think if we had a more educated society, we wouldn't have this like anti-intellectual, anti-school movement. And I think if the government stopped subsidizing these colleges for no reason, even though they have these billion-dollar endowments, we'd be in a better place.
I think there's a lot of interesting points being made here, and I think a lot of the justifications you're giving, for example, for government subsidized college education, I think are very intriguing and interesting and have merit. Before the show, you were mentioning that you support UBI, and there are some libertarian intellectuals, Milton Friedman notably, who was a supporter of UBI. But generally speaking, those policies that you're enacting really go against most libertarian think tanks. You're not going to hear that from the von Mises Institute, of whom I went to a conference back in 2000, Auburn University, and the Cato Institute and the Club for Growth. You're not going to have Larry Kudlow, who's kind of libertarian on selectively libertarian on economic issues. You're not going to find them saying that. So, and I say this as a complimentary thing. A point of compliment, you're very nuanced compared to a lot of libertarians that I've met, and a lot of the think tanks and Koch brothers, a lot of this, they would say you're a socialist. Ludwig von Mises in his more advanced years would say you're a socialist. So what propelled you to move outside ideological libertarianism, if you will, like small government, limited government, no matter what?
So yeah, you're totally correct in this sense. Again, I lean left in a lot of things, and so I wouldn't say that I'm some true libertarian like Ayn Rand. I wouldn't say that I go that far, right? I would say that, like, if we had something like a UBI, right, I think you could then start to abolish all this unnecessary government spending. Like, if you had a UBI, people wouldn't need government subsidized healthcare as much, or maybe I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's true or not, but like there's evidence to suggest that we wouldn't need it as much. We wouldn't need to have government funded like welfare programs, social safety nets, because that would be taken care of. Like, so I think by trading what we have for a UBI, I think that'd be better. I'm not saying put a UBI on top of what we have. Maybe we start with that. I don't know, but I wouldn't say that, like, having a UBI on top of everything else we have now, our incredibly inflated government spending, our bloated system. That, I don't know if that'd be a good idea. It'd obviously be unaffordable. The stimulus is probably unaffordable. I don't know who's paying for this, right? This $2 trillion stimulus, but like at some point you can start to take out some of that government spending and substitute it with a UBI instead. Because I feel like if you gave people money, they spend it better than the government does taking your money and spending it for you, right? Like, if the government wants to build you a road, they gotta hire someone at a inflated cost. Then they gotta hire someone to hire someone, right? Then they gotta hire that person that at higher cost and higher cost. And at the end of the day, you end up paying like 200% what you normally would have paid for if you just paid some guy to make a road for you, right? And so if you give money to the citizens, to people, they're going to spend it better. The velocity of money, it's going to hit hands that need it. It's going to move better. You're going to see stimulus you've never seen before. It's going to be great. It'd be awesome, right? It'd be a good thing. If you give it to the government to do it, not so good, So that's sort of why I advocate for a UBI. It's not because I want the government just giving people money. It's that I think I trust the money in the hands of people more than I do in the hands of the government. And I think they'd spend it better. They'd do much more with it. It would go farther. It would help them more. That's why I advocate for a UBI. And I know that's not truly libertarianism. I get that, but again, libertarianism is not. There's no way you can have it in a vacuum, right? There's just no way. If you were true libertarian, the whole world would be dominated by the rich. That's the truth, right? Like, and so
well, it's like what we have right now. I mean, studies like the one by Princeton University and Northwestern University. Gillens, and I forget the other professor's last name, they compiled a study in 2014 which shows that the government is basically a plutocracy right now. And ever since starting under Ronald Reagan and his successors, whether Democratic or Republican dominated Congresses and presidents, we've continued to be in a plutocracy. In fact, I don't know if it was Citibank or one of the major banks actually had an infamous memo that was kept secret, which described the United States and the economy as actually a plutonomy, where it's, again, rule by the super rich. And, the stance that Herschell and I had, I used to be a proponent of deregulation and tax cuts and free trade back in the day. And when I saw that clash with reality and good stated conservative goals, then I started to become really, really disillusioned with Reaganism, if you will, or conservatism as is commonly discussed. I definitely agree with your point regarding bottom-up economics or demand-based economics. when more people as individuals, not corporations, but individual families and citizens have money? Absolutely. When they have that kind of money, it goes straight back in the economy. People can choose to invest it. They pay off their debt or help pay down their debt. They pay their, off their rent, et cetera, et cetera. It goes back into the economy. It makes sense. Totally what you're saying. And I'm glad there are those on the right, such as yourself, that really, or somewhat on the right, or whatever you want to call it, or mixture, I think, that understands this. Is a very good podcast called Pitchfork Economics. It's led by it's hosted and run by this business investor, Nick Hanauer. He's like almost a billionaire. He talks basically everything you're saying he supports in that respect, all about bottom-up economics. I used to be an advocate of supply-side economics, but again, when you see the aggregate picture, it's been a failure. It's benefited the super wealthy, and it's disadvantaged the American middle class. Herschell, did you have anything to add?
Well, I would say that going off of Lloyd's point, that we're kind of talking about giving money directly to people. My hometown, if the economic data is correct, has a median income of about $14,000 a year.
Oof.
Dirt poor.
Oof.
And with the stimulus and the taxes hitting the market like virtually at the same time, there are people that have equaled or have surpassed the median income of the area in the span of 3 weeks. And what I've seen lately is that people are spending money at restaurants, people are spending money paying down debts, people are spending money on new vehicles or repairing their old vehicles. So this is a point that I'm trying to make, that I think that more populist, a little center-left libertarians and us can make is that, look, what the goal of the government should be, irregardless of your ideology, is to make this, to help working class people, to help the people that aren't as advantaged as those on the top of the system. And I think that I wouldn't personally have a problem is that if we could create a system that does take off, like if there wasn't food stamps, welfare, or housing assistance, but you cut everybody below a certain income level a blank check for like $1,500 or $2,000 a month. I'm not saying that this is the perfect plan. What I'm saying is, though, if you replace that income and you gave this people that money, they're not going to put it in the bank. They're not going to hoard it in an offshore bank account. They're going to spend it at the gas stations, at the restaurants, and they're going to help the local economy directly. And I've got no problem with saving money in the government. That's something I wanted to kind of tell the viewers. Like, yeah, we're not small government advocates, but I don't want to spend money for the sake of spending money.
Exactly.
I'm not looking to wheelbarrow cash into a furnace just for the fun of it. Like, look, I want the dollars that we take out of somebody's pocket to be spent as effectively as possible. And if that means trimming the I can't ever say the word bureaucracy down in the federal and state governments, I've got no problem with that. So Nevin, what do you think about that?
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, as I said, you look at the cash infusions to everyday people in Canada and Western Europe and the other industrialized countries, it's worked very well. It's minimized the social and economic dislocations of the people. It's clearly worked because they've invested in the people. I mean, Germany, they subsidize, the federal government in Germany subsidized what, like 75% of German workers' wages. I mean, but unfortunately, this is one of the massive failures of Trump. And one of the reasons why I didn't vote for him is because he handled the COVID pandemic miserably. And, I mean, I was just reading a story where, again, it talked about how the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection loans, there was no accountability. There was misappropriation of it. A lot of the money went to major corporations. There's been scandals around it. All that money could have been cut in monthly checks at $2,000 a month for those making under $200,000. And thank you, Nancy Pelosi and corporate Democrats, for that restriction. that would have buttressed the economy. We're everyday people. We have bills to pay and family support, the three of us. That's going to get recycled in the economy. And I don't understand why. I understand why, but it's frustrating why the economic and political elites don't get it. And to me, it's not a matter of small versus big government. It's who controls the government. And I like to steer the conversation away from small versus big government. I think in this country's current predicament, I think that doesn't apply as much. Now, if you had a massive fascist or communist party becoming more and more prominent, then yes, that'll have to enter the discussion, because nobody wants to live on no freedom-loving person, frankly.
I'll say not nobody. Someone does.
I don't want to say nobody, because it's gaining appeal in this country, which is something that frightens the heck out of Herschel and I. There is this appeal of socialism and communism, and even a little bit of fascism too as well. So, but that could be a different discussion. But I think both of you are right on target. I mean, spot on.
Well, that's another point that we could ask Lloyd about, because I'm sure he has his opinion on it. Over the last several years, I met Lloyd in a libertarian group back when I was a libertarian, and that was a hell of a group. I really loved that meme group.
Yep.
But you would see, like, I watched it, like the radicalism steadily escalated up in that group until like the last moment when it was deleted. Or I don't know exactly if somebody deleted it or it got.
Oh, it got shut down because it's just a fascist page now. So
yeah. But what I'm saying is, Lloyd, and this is what I want to ask you, is why do you think communism, fascism, radical anarchism, like let's burn the whole country down and kill everybody, is starting to gain so much popularity with especially mine and your demographic of young, 30-ish and under men?
Several reasons, man. I think the biggest, obviously, is just we have a terrible education system, right? We just don't teach like political fundamentals in a good way at all. Like, I don't want to like blame religion. I think religion has a part of it. I really do. I think if you're able to have that sort of mentality, like I don't want to call it cult mentality. I'm not trying to bash anyone's religion, but like some religious ideology is pretty cult-like. If you're able to fall into that, then you can fall into something else and just be a cult-like, right? And you combine that with misinformation, right? When you see a meme online and it's sketchy, you should be able to look at it and say, oh, hey, that looks sketchy. Let me check that real quick, right? Let me find a viable source. Let me look at that source and let me just read through it real quick. Yeah, that meme's fake or that meme's true, right? That doesn't happen. It's like, oh, click share. There it is. That's all you do, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks cool. It was funny, ha ha ha, and then you start to believe it, right? It's misinformation. Again, bad job by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to not throttle this stuff before it became an issue. We should never had Trump won, honestly, in my opinion. We should have known that was going to be a bad idea. We did. We knew it was going to be a bad idea. And then we just let it happen. Facebook let it happen. And finally, after almost a literal insurrection, they finally step in and do some small thing. It's like, come on, man. So that's one reason why education is poor. And then we make secondary education inaccessible. It's just too much money. Like you just can't go to school reasonably. If you do go to school, secondary education, grade 13 and above, it costs you an arm and a leg, and you spend the rest of your life paying for that debt, even if it works out for you, right? And so I think those are some of the main reasons why we have this this anti-intellectual movement where people think like echo chambers, right? They're allowed to have these online echo chambers because Facebook won't stop them. Communism works obviously online. It's fine online, or fascism is totally fine online. Build the wall, build the border camps, like take away human rights for feeling, These things are totally normal online. It doesn't affect you at all. You can promote it all you want and no one's going to stop you. Facebook won't, no one will. So the government won't, no one's going to stop you. So that's kind of, I think, where it stems from. And obviously, I think everyone sort of knows at the end of the day that true communism or fascism or extreme anarchy, libertarianism, like, is bad. I think we all kind of understand that. We all sort of reside in the middle of that compass. But for some reason online it doesn't feel that way. It feels like everything has to be to some extreme, and it's funny and it's easy to get to those extremes, right? I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
Weird
and
question.
that's the thing is like I remember witnessing this in libertarian groups. It's like, man, if you didn't support absolutely no taxes, open borders, like four people running the entire federal government, you were socialist. Or in my time as a conservative, like if you didn't absolutely support Trump 100% all the time, no matter what, you were a dirty, filthy, rusky, commie, libtard, and it's like everything's a spectrum. Everything exists on a spectrum of beliefs, and I'd be an idiot to say like what I believe is the absolute gospel truth. Nothing else will work but this. You're all stupid except me because I'm obviously the smartest guy that's ever lived. And we think that's funny, but this is how people act on the internet. That they're the smartest person that's ever lived, the person that figured it all out. And one of the things that I try to remind myself, especially because I feel like I'm a lot better off now than I was several years ago, it's like, look, I've got no end of stuff that I can learn. Nevin, I'm sure you've spent your entire life in it, reading and studying and learning. Lloyd, you're a smart guy. But I don't think any of us would claim to be like the smartest guy on the block.
No way. No way. No way. I don't know everything. Far from it.
Yeah.
Nope.
And
I always learned new things from different people. I have to say that's one of the joys of life is you get to learn things from different people, even people that you might not agree with or not see eye to eye on.
yeah. And it's the thing that I hope that we can accomplish with this show. And Lloyd, you've done a good job of it on your show. Is everybody wants to jack up the rhetoric to 100 all the time. They've got to they've got to have that hit piece. They've got to have that just going after somebody. They're the end of the world. This is if Donald Trump elected, the end of the world. Hillary Clinton elected, end of the world. Joe Biden is going to destroy the country. Communists are destroying it, whatever it is. And it's something that I've hated to see because I don't even like getting online anymore because people are so tribal. They back themselves into such extreme positions online that hell, it's not even worth talking to most of them unless you absolutely agree with them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty disgusting. Like literally, the tribalism is so bad. I mean, like I have so many friends who are just in pure echo chambers. Like there's just no differing opinions whatsoever, right? And it's crazy because like at the end of the day, right, when we elect our leaders, we have essentially two choices, right? And it's just so hard for me to imagine in a country of like 320 million, or 250 million voters, or however many voters we have, there's two voices. That's so weird to me that is kind of what it boils down to. And then if you have anything outside of those two opinions, you're either a fascist, a racist, communist. Like it's like, okay, like I'm not. I just think that we should, maybe have a little differences here. Maybe we should pay a little less taxes here and more here, or this that. But no, you're now a communist because you suggested that the people who make $1 billion or more should pay a little bit more in taxes. Like that's communism now. Or you say that the government shouldn't have any say in who you hire or how much you hire them at. Oh, you're now a fascist, or you're a racist, and you hate trans people because someone will not hire a trans person, right? And I don't want to get to that because I fully support those kind of rights, but I just don't know, like I don't know how you make change in a system that is just two opinions, right? It's you're right or you're wrong. That's it. There's no gray area at all anymore. Everything you say is taken to some extreme where you're just a bigot or you're a communist. Like, what do you do? How do you make change in that system? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's going to be a difficult situation because I think part of it comes through the concentration of media and the proliferation of infotainment, which passes as news. I think that's a very big problem that started in the 1990s. You have the concentration of media power because you have a federal government that is captured essentially by Reaganism and Justice Bork on monopoly issues. And they believe that basically mergers and acquisitions should occur like me getting up in the morning and taking a walk, which is quite often because I'm into fitness. So I think there's that problem. I think in certain ways, a competitive, decentralized media, like what we used to have pre-Reagan, small town newspapers, municipal news channels, and whatnot, I think that might be a step in the right direction. And that would entail repealing the Clinton era Telecommunications Act of 1996 and going back to the Communications Act of FDR. And I think making news basically about just reporting the news like what it used to be. I think that's a big part of it. And I think there also needs to be a cultural shift somehow where you get a new group of political leaders, a mass movement that will use the bully pulpit to endorse, an intellectualism that's not egg-headed or snobby, but is focusing on, hey, these are the problems, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is how we're going to build a better national community. I think you made a lot of good points, Lloyd, about how people are getting attracted, the younger people are getting to extremist ideologies. However, I really want to add one thing, because one of the things that have always fascinated me is the study of extremist movements, particularly that of the left, as well as National Socialist and fascist groups, which I refuse to consider right-wing, by the way. I've studied them very intensely. I find listening and even talking to extremists and finding out why they join them, what is overwhelmingly clear is their very real disillusionment with the system, that we're an oligarchy with democratic trappings. As I said, the government is not responsive to the people. It's just responsive to the needs of the private sector, oligarch, globalist, capitalists, and whatnot. You have this feeling that the American dream is withering away, not because of, per se, high taxes or regulation, but because their employer has total control over them and has not given them a meaningful raise and cut their benefits while their company is doing great. What are your thoughts regarding that additional explanation on really what is a structural failure of the American system?
I think it's pretty accurate. I actually, I did took a psychology class as part of my degree, and my my ending essay was on like conspiracy theories, right? And like why people fall into these conspiracies, QAnon, whatever. And it turns out like people will believe conflicting conspiracy theories. I don't want to I don't want to like make people sound stupid, but like if you believe the theories that for example were Princess Diana, right? Some theories are that the government killed her, and some theories are that she's still alive and she's in hiding, right? And so the people that believed one were more likely to believe the other, and they're contradictory. If she's dead, she can't be in hiding. If she's in hiding, she can't be dead, right? Like, there's just no way to reconcile that. And so, people just fall for these things that, again, I'm not some like psychologist. I have so much to learn, but like, it just sounds like some people just don't have a grasp on intellectualism, right? I don't know. Like, it's hard to put a word on it, but people just fall for these like obviously stupid, clearly fake things, and that leads to extremism, right? And so I don't know how someone who thinks that 9/11 was a hoax, but 9/11 also didn't happen, or whatever, like whatever conspiracy they think. How do you, or they want, they make a militia and they become extremists and they want to take the government down and they threaten to kidnap the governor of Michigan or whatever. Like, I don't know how you reach them when like something that should be so obvious to you is just not. I
What,
just it's
if I could cut in for a second, because I think that you're talking past each other for a second. So what Nevin's trying to say is that the system, to a lot of people, the system is broken. Like they do not believe that by their own efforts they can make a life for themselves. So that was always the American dream is that if I work hard, if I get up in the mornings and I show up to work and I work hard, or I go to college and get an education and then work hard, that I will make it, that I will have a better life than my parents did, or at least a life that is able to support me in a healthy way. And I think what Nevin's trying to ask is that a lot of these people, take the Midwest, the Rust Belt, used to be one of the better off areas of the country when you had the largest concentration of manufacturing jobs, good jobs, jobs that people bought houses with, jobs that people bought cars with. And then you took that away. You took their means of making a good living in this life. They went from working a $30 an hour job in a factory to working a $7.50 or $8 an hour job at a restaurant, just trying to make it. And then you get this guy like Trump that comes along that's talking about rebuilding the manufacturing base. It's talking about giving your job back, rebuilding the country, make America great again. I think that's what Nevin was trying to say is, how do we stop that? These people that have lost everything, that their whole life has been turned upside down, and you see these people, statistically speaking, are by far the most likely to adopt extremist opinions.
That makes sense. Okay, I sort of see what you're saying now. How do you combat that? I'm sure smarter people than me have tried and failed, right? But I'll say that education. Again, we really have to put emphasis on education. We have to understand that like taxes that go to education pay for themselves, right? People need to understand that. Like, I think people also need to understand that like we're in a global economy now. There's automation is real, like don't cling to this old mentality, coal jobs or manufacturing. It might not be there, right? Be flexible in your mentality as far as that goes. Again, this is easier said than done, obviously, but unions are a big part. We've gone away from unions, right? We should go back to the idea that like there was an organization that was fighting for your wages, for your health, your safety, and we've sort of like gone away from that for some reason. I don't know why. I don't understand the reason, obviously, but unions. We should get back to having more unions. We should also, we should diversify our election picks, right? Like this idea that there's two opinions is stupid. Like Trump obviously was, I don't want to say pretended, he did, I think he did, but pretended to advocate for working class Americans while being obviously one of the wealthiest elites ever, right? And you can't fall for that. Education, I guess. I don't know. Like, how do you fall for someone who's a wolf in sheep's clothing? Like, he's a wolf in wolf. Like, he looks like a wolf, and he was a wolf. Like, how do you fall for that? I don't know. So,
well, I think the candidate that he ran against, Hillary Clinton, was a disaster on many fronts and hopelessly corrupt. And Trump had always, at least rhetorically, a wild grab bag of opinions where he came across actually as an old-style radical centrist or moderate. He addressed the issue of the offshoring of jobs and production, the labor arbitrage from the exploitation of documented and undocumented immigrants and whatnot, drain the swamp, where he was even open to lobbying campaign finance reform and all the rest of it. And that's something that Hillary was part of the swamp, along with the other Republican candidates that he ran against. So I think that's where he had his appeal. And, he was, at least rhetorically, going against even some of the core tenets of Reaganomics as far back as the 1980s, witness his interview with Oprah. But you mentioned, the unions, very important, because the unions and conservative publications, a few of them, have made this point, where unions are actually a conservative force that allows employers and employees to negotiate, theoretically at least, more of an equal strength and equal power, employer versus a mass of employees. An individual does not have the same power as their boss. I mean, and that's one of the flaws, in my opinion, of free market thinking, the Ben Shapiro's and whatnot. And I think the unions are a better way to secure higher wages for people and better benefits without having to resort to the government to subsidize basic social services. When you have stronger unions, you'll have less of a need for government welfare. That's my opinion. Why do you think Denmark and other Scandinavian countries, Germany, are doing so well? Some of those countries don't have a minimum wage because their unions are so powerful. But unfortunately, you have the Reagan Tea Party globalist employer assault against unions that always opposed the New Deal, and they were always politically powerful and well-funded, these anti-union forces. And unfortunately, right to work covers half the country. And right to work has an interesting history, by the way. It actually started not only with globalist employers groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but also actual racist personalities too as well. There was actually an anarcho-capitalist or libertarian um, article where it actually ripped apart right to work as a violation of free negotiation and the ability to negotiate free contracts too. And it traced the history of that. I don't remember the journal off the title off the top of my head, but it really was very well reasoned. So I think you're spot on with that. But one other question, and this is going to be the last part of our interview, it's going to go into foreign policy, which bleeds into, you mentioned the global economy and whatnot. And here's where, I guess where Herschell and I are most strongly civic nationalists. We're not racial nationalists. We despise racial nationalism. China and Russia, from our position, are major threats to our national security. And we have to protect the homeland against, possible attack against us. And they do have war plans without getting into details on that, both of them, and they're both allies. Our manufacturing is very critical for national security, as well as the ability to innovate and to maintain a healthy supply chain within this country. We saw what the quote global economy did with COVID, where we couldn't even produce PPEs, vital drugs, things of that nature. Fukushima earthquake a few years back, Ford had trouble getting components for vehicles from Japan, like Hitachi and whatnot. And I can give dozens of other examples. Do you think it's vital for our national security and really needed to sometime to rebuild our industrial base using state action? I mean, do you think the global economy has failed the United States, given to what outsourcing, free trade, and open borders have done to the working and middle income people in this country, as well as nationally based industries?
I would say that, yeah, I mean, America as a whole gets a pretty bad deal out of globalism, right? Like, of all the countries that benefit from globalism, I think we're like third world countries obviously don't get much out of it. I guess maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't studied it much, but we don't get a good deal, right? Like we spend so much on defense to cover the world. We cover all of our allies, and that comes out of our pocket. We subsidize healthcare for the rest of the world. The rest of the world is able to go to socialized medicine because we continue to foot the bill, right? We continue to foot the bill for research, foot the bill for our expensive healthcare system that allows our corporations to profit off of us. But when they go overseas, they don't profit off of us, right? Manufacturing, right? Like our manufacturing helps the world, remarkably. Theirs doesn't really affect us as much, right? Now, obviously, like I said, Fukushima was a good example with the car parts. COVID being probably the best example. It's just decimated. We couldn't even make masks, right? They had to switch. Hanes had to switch from making underwear to making masks out of the same material, right? And so, yes, I think we get a bad deal out of globalism as a whole, and I do think we need to strengthen our manufacturing. And if it takes the government to step in and say, "Hey, man, we need to get this solidified," I'm not so much against it. My idea of the government is leading the people in a direction that's reasonable, or at least presenting the information. It's pretty clear that we stand to benefit from securing up. I wouldn't say being less global, but securing up our manufacturing a little bit, or our energy sector a little bit. The government could definitely do a better job at promoting that, educating that, helping with it, funding it. Again, I wouldn't mind my tax dollars going to that because it would help in the end. So no, I mean, I think again, we get a really bad deal out of globalism as a whole. We get a lot of immigration is sometimes good, sometimes not. A lot of bad policy. We could definitely improve if we just made a again. I hate to use the word nationalist, but a little more nationalist policy that tied up some of those loose ends that we just clearly suffer from, if that makes any
Well,
sense.
yeah, no, it does. And, part of the problem, and you mentioned it earlier in your point, is the words like socialism, capitalism, terminology, this political party-based tribalism. It really has corrupted our vocabulary because there are many different types of socialism. There are many different types of capitalism. There are different types of nationalism. I mean, I can't stand racial nationalism, the white supremacist types, National Socialist types. I'm sorry, they got a body count, the size of the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel in the Bible. So I mean, and I think I think that earlier point you made was good. But yes, I think you really strike me as somebody who's very nuanced. You have like libertarian roots because in general you love freedom, but it seems like you recognize the need for the state to sometimes step in, which will then allow people, especially average people, greater freedom. I mean, I'm reminded of a quote by Franklin Roosevelt where he says, in our personal ambitions, we're individualists, but as a nation, as an economy, when it comes to economics and politics, we as a nation either all go up or all go down. And I think that's where you're coming from and where you've evolved. You've worked to harmonize, very similar in some ways to Herschel and I. We harmonize seemingly contradictory positions in order to achieve a central goal. With Herschel and I, we focus more on the accent, put more of an accent on the needs of the nation, whereas you, and nothing wrong with it, nation I think is important to you, but you're more into how are we going to maximize the freedom of the individual to pursue his or her own individual interests. And you look at policies whether they work or they don't, rather than through ideology.
That sounds pretty accurate, actually. Yeah, I mean, like, if in my perfect world, if I had something like, could do the Thanos snap and just have the world be perfect, right, the way I wanted to, human rights wouldn't even be a discussion. You'd have all of them. Abortion would be legal. I mean, you wouldn't even talk about it. It doesn't affect you. Just look the other way, right? Jaywalking, victimless crimes wouldn't exist. I think the state oversteps. Obviously, we live in like a police state. Please don't argue with me in this. We have like 4 times the people in jail than China does, and they have like 5 times the people we do. Like, you can't argue we don't have a police state. We do have a police state. Like, it's crazy to say that we have this many people in jail for just victimless crimes, right? Victimless crimes wouldn't exist if you park somewhere. The meter maid wouldn't tow your car because unless there was like someone that couldn't park. If there was parking spaces open, you'd be good to go. You'd be able to do meth in your front yard and do whatever you want. Like, I'm not advocating for a complete like libertarian society, but like if there's no victim, then the government shouldn't be there. But what the government is crucial in is educating people on what is right, protecting those freedoms of people, right? Like making sure that those freedoms can be expressed. So these ethnic groups, any sort of like corruption to that could be kiboshed. Things like dictating this fake information era we're in, where Facebook and Twitter just fake information. It's all fake. It's fake memes, deep fakes, all these sort of things. They would help step in and help with that when it's needed. The government needs to be there. I totally support that. When it's not needed, the government does not need to be there. That's sort of, I guess, the mentality yeah, your summary was very, very good. Like, I do think that there's an important. It's important to be sort of proud of the nation you come from and to help build something from either from yourself or for your nation. If that's all you can do, that's okay. But I also think it's important to understand that you need to understand at a fundamental core level what like personal freedom really is. And if you want personal freedom, you have to let everyone else have it as well. I mean, you have to let other people express their freedom, even if it doesn't make you comfortable. It doesn't matter. So Is that a good summary? I'm probably mixing my words here a little
No,
bit.
no, no. And I think you mentioned about the criminal justice issue. I think you raised valid points. I wish I had more time to discuss it, but in general, Herschel and I, or at least I could speak for myself, I'm more of a combination of, yes, law and order for serious crimes, major felonies, but at the same time, and the Democrats, is a shame, they use the term defund the police, which actually doesn't explain actually what's behind it. Bernie did a better job, probably, out of all of them, explaining what it is. You have to have a well-trained and well-armed police. There's no question about it. But crime is a social malady. It's a product of a decaying social, economic, and political structure. A lot of these victimless crimes and whatnot, if people had a better life for themselves, you will see crime go down. It did exist in this country to a degree. In the high crime inner city areas where you had the industries and whatnot, it wasn't nearly as bad as it was because people were doing well. So they didn't have much idle time. And then I would also stress for nonviolent criminal offenders, or non-felony criminal offenders, I should say, at least, look at education and rehabilitation too as well. So I think, again, this is a classic case where it's nuanced. It's like, not, it shouldn't be just okay, crack the skulls open with a baton, one extreme, and then it shouldn't be, oh, let's coddle every criminal on the other hand. I think the arguments that both sides bring are legitimate. And goes back to your earlier point about everything's so darn tribal or black and white on certain things. I mean, what do you have to say, Herschel, about what Lloyd and I were discussing about crime
Well, I
as
think
our last point?
it's funny to me because I've been sitting here listening to you two talk for a minute, and this is like the best example of dialectics that I've heard in a long time. You've got, I'm using you kind of as a sub for me too on this, but for you, we're pushing for the bigger picture, the nation, the what can we do to make the nation better. Lloyd is pushing for, okay, that's fine. What can we do for the individual too? Let's not forget the individual. And in all this, it's such a great conversation for me to hear because this is the conversations that need to be happening. We talk about criminal justice reform. I believe that everybody can agree that we've got too damn many people in prison right now, way too many people. And not just in prison too, like the whole jail system is a complete screwed up mess, top to bottom. I could take you down to my local jail and it's just stuffed to the brim. And that's the thing is that we can't be throwing everybody in jail. We can't be throwing, that can't be the only solution to this problem. When I look around and I see people that screw up when they're 19 or 20 years old and they go to prison, now they've got a felony on their record and their life is, maybe they will succeed, maybe they'll pull it out later on, but for a lot of people, once they get a felony or a couple of violent charges on them, that's it. They'll never find good jobs. If they do, it'll be an uphill battle the whole way. They'll probably not get admitted to college. It's the goal of the criminal justice system should be to deter crime and to rehabilitate criminals. And we're not doing either. Crime rates across this country in the inner cities are still bad. And we have one of the highest percentages of repeat offenders in the developed world. Coupling that with the fact that we have the largest prison population in the developed world, you just see how these cycles of crime and prison just repeat themselves over and over and over again across white communities, black communities, Mexican communities, urban communities and rural communities. And I think that's the job, and where I believe the libertarians amongst us are best suited to be is to say, like, look, we've got to pump the brakes on this somewhere, somehow. And if we don't, we can't survive like this forever. And I look at this little town of mine and I think of how many people here's lives have been adversely affected by the criminal justice system's worst side. I don't know. But I know that we're running out of time, so I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah,
no, bro.
This has been a great conversation. I think we're going to have to continue this in probably several shows. I mean, I know this is kind of, I'm speaking extemporaneously, but We'd love to have you back on the show. I'm sure Herschel would agree with me. We'd like to have you even as a semi-regular guest because I think you have a lot of good insights. I think this has been a terrific conversation. I mean, I wanted to get into while you were talking about criminal justice. I'm like, I wanted to nab you about prison labor and prison privatization because I know you got opinions, both
Oh
of you,
yeah.
on that.
Oh yeah.
So that could, of course, be our next discussion. But some of our next discussion topics. We definitely would love to have you back, probably in April, because we have one more guest in March. And oh, look, we could do double guests. I mean, I'm available Sundays at least. We'll have to work with our schedules because I know both of us are busy. But this has been a great show. You've been a fantastic guest. You're very well spoken, you're informed, you're articulate, and you're open minded. I mean, Herschel couldn't have asked for a better guest here.
That's a very strong endorsement. I don't know where it's coming from. If you hear the dialogue in my head, it's just all spaghetti at this point. I'm surprised it comes out in any way that's audible at all, right? But no, I mean, if I had one last point, just to like kind of cement my position, I suppose is just like, if you're listening to this, right, don't fall into the extremes, right? Like we can agree on a lot of things. We agree on a lot more than you think. Don't listen to someone that says something that you don't agree with. Listen to the rest of it as well. Don't just pick the part that you don't agree with and then think that person is extreme. No, just like hear everyone out. Open your ears to the conversation and then get more involved and more informed, right? Like if you're a young person, especially, like the reason your voice is not heard is because you're not engaged. Your generation or your age group is just you're not voting, you're not going to the town hall meetings, you're not writing legislation, you're not writing your senator, whatever it is, right? Just get more engaged, get involved. Things will work out for you if you do that. It doesn't matter if you have a slightly different opinion than someone else. Don't That's all fluff. Ignore that. Just get engaged and do more podcasts, like whatever it is. Just get out there and do it. We would love to see you. That'd be awesome. I would love it.
Okay. Well, everybody, I have to say this was an enjoyable show. I can't wait to see y'all whenever we get back together. To the audience listening, we should have, like Nevin said, one more interview that will be releasing sometime Saturday evening of next week if everything holds up. Of course, our schedules change. We'll keep everybody updated, but I want to thank everybody that listened in. Lloyd, you've been a great guest, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, guys.